Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Juan Meisel, and he is the founder and CEO at Grip. And Grip is providing cold 3PL fulfillment services. And we're going to dive a little bit into his background. He spent some time at Butcher Box and kind of find out, why he decided to found this company, Grip, and talk a little bit about some of the challenges around fulfilling and shipping perishable goods as well. So, Juan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me here.
Definitely happy to get you on. Happy to talk about this. I think this is we could say a hot topic, but also a cool one as well, right? As we talk about kind of cold storage and cold chain fulfillment. But why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of your background and how you came to found Grip and what Grip's all about?
Yeah, of course. So I joined ButcherBox, as you were just mentioning, super early on. As
Mm,
you know, one of like the first 5 team members or so. And at ButcherBox, for those of you who don't know, we ship frozen meat in the mail. So
mm,
grass-fed, organic, heritage bread, pork, and wild-caught seafood, salmon from Alaska, lobster from Maine, scallops from George Bank, very high premium stuff. And when we were getting started, it was all about like, hey, how do we get people to buy meat online? It's not
mm,
common. Like nowadays, it's much more common sense, common knowledge. People do it. They don't think about
yeah.
how it's gonna get delivered. But 10 years ago, we had to like overcome that knowledge gap that the consumer base had. So our first focus the first year, hey, how do we get people to give us a credit card and buy meat online? The second part of that was, okay, we actually now already have people that are buying stuff online from us. Like, how do we actually deliver this in a way that we increase the probability of success, and we just keep a very high end premium customer experience because they're buying meat for them and for their family, and it's $100 to $200 expenses when you're buying one of those boxes. So logistics and fulfillment and shipping became our biggest problem as a company at some point, where now all the thousands of boxes that we were selling, we now had to ship and deliver to the customers frozen. Because ButcherBox is a bootstrap company, we never raised any money from anyone. We didn't really have the
Mm,
money in the bank to say, hey, just ship it and then we'll figure it out. Because
yeah.
every single one of these boxes that's frozen, if you don't deliver it how you're supposed to, you have to either reship or refund. And then the probability of that customer like buying from you again, of course, drops a lot significantly. So you can't really afford, unless you have millions of dollars in the bank, to be reshipping and refunding these boxes. So it became the biggest problem for us, and we were like, okay, trying to solve this. I took over all the logistics and operations and trying to solve this problem, and it became apparent to us that like, hey, this is very hard. Like there's so many variables that go into it that there's not something out there that you can just plug into and it essentially tells you what the best way to ship these boxes are. And
Mm,
if shipping frozen stuff in the mail is a bus, we're driving that bus as a company. Like we're not just taking a
mm,
passenger seat, because we need to build stuff so that we can ensure that we increase probability of success. So through that experience at ButcherBox, then I started to realize that, hey, we're putting millions of dollars into this as a company. This is not necessarily our
mm,
strength. ButcherBox is an amazing brand. It's a good meat sourcer. It has a beautiful point of sale system, or front end website, and that's
mm,
the strength of the company, but not necessarily the logistics and fulfillment. So we had to grow, my team significantly. We had to spend millions of dollars in technology trying to solve for the problem, and then I randomly started to get a lot of inbound from other companies trying to do some of the same stuff, or like similar, needs of logistics and fulfillment, where they would say, "Hey Juan, you're leading logistics at ButcherBox, and I get my ButcherBox frozen to my doorstep. Like, how are you guys doing this? I'm trying to ship, ready to eat meals, other meat products, frozen human grade pet food that's like exponentially growing, and a lot of companies having the same type of issues out there. I started to help them anecdotally, like, hey, try this, try that, advising some of them. And then it just clicked for me that, hey, this is an industry wide problem. This is not just a
mm,
box problem. This is not just like a one or two, three company problem. This is an industry wide problem. The reason for it, as I was saying, is hey, this market is just exponentially growing right now. Like regular e-commerce has been around for, let's call it 30 years or so, but
Yeah.
frozen or perishable e-commerce has only been around for the last decade or so, since we were getting started. So
Mm,
it's a new problem because the market now knows that you can buy frozen or perishable stuff delivered, and there's just so many more products that are amazing brands out there that are trying to deliver that experience for them. So it just became apparent, hey, there's a big need for this, and we solved it at ButcherBox, doing a lot of technology, a lot of different processes and systems. So let's just solve these for the market now.
mm. Yeah, yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear that, and I didn't realize that ButcherBox was bootstrapped as well. I think that's pretty interesting because certainly like doing this kind of shipping. I mean, any kind of shipping is certainly capital intensive, but even more so when you're having to ship stuff that's frozen or needs to be temperature controlled. So very interesting to hear that, and it makes total sense that you're kind of coming into the space and addressing a lot of those challenges that you saw in the past with grip now. So I mean, I guess tell us really, kind of as a, I guess, high level overview, what is grip really doing and addressing? Because you have facilities, right? So I mean, you have assets and things like that. I mean, what is really the focus and the goal of grip?
So at first we said, hey, what's the lowest hanging fruit here? Like, how are
Mm,
people, like, what can we create and develop that will help a lot of these companies within their current ecosystem first, in terms of what they're currently doing? And the answer to that is what we now call our shipping engine, that makes the decisions of how to ship a box of perishable products in the mail. So
mm,
essentially, we developed this piece of software that when our customer ships something, their system pings our system and says, "Hey, Grip, I have a zip code. I have an order for zip code 33130. How do I ship it?" And then
mm,
our system is real time looking at temperatures through the journey, what type of product is it, what are the carrier options, what are the services, how's on time delivery for every single one of the options of getting there, in terms of what you have, what type of boxes you have in hand, how much insulation can you add to a box, types of refrigerant going up or down, major weather events to the journey. We're looking at millions of data points where the software then goes back and says, hey, to increase probability of success, this is how you need to ship this box. And it essentially
mm,
dictates what's every single variable of how to ship the box, and it makes the decisions for you. The main differences between perishable and non-perishable is that in the non-perishable world, you don't have to make as many decisions, and there's really not a lot of variables that change dynamically, like
mm,
through like after you get the order, that makes you like change the way that you're shipping the box. In the perishable world, like if you are not looking at those variables, it can mean like thousands of dollars in mistakes or damages, or losing lifetime value of the customer if you're not making those decisions dynamically. So that's essentially the first piece of software that we created, and we say, hey, let's integrate with our customers. After that, our customers came to us and said, hey, Grip, this is awesome, and this is adding a ton of value as it is, but fulfillment is still a problem for me, because I don't have the full end-to-end connection within the same system, the same platform, and under the same roof. And we quickly realized that, hey, for this to be a completely game changer and like industry enabler, we just have to do all the fulfillment for it as well, because that's
mm,
where everything is under the same roof, and you have all the different data scans through the system that then dictate how you're shipping the next box as well. So that's when we then said with our same customers, we said, hey, let's open facilities across the country, and let's just control the full backend and end to end of these, so that they can focus on what they do best, which is creating a beautiful brand, selling,
yeah,
like developing amazing products, because their forte is just not the logistics of it. So that's what we do now. We
mm,
essentially connect with our partners, where we develop this order management system all internally as well, that connects straight into our shipping engine, as I was saying, and then it also has a connection for all the fulfillment capabilities as well. So if you're a brand now, you can essentially like either connect through our API or through Shopify if you're in Shopify as well, and then we handle all the backend from there. Like there's no more like, if you look 5-10 years back into perishable
mhm,
for e-commerce, brands were using maybe like I don't know, like five, six, eight different pieces of software that they had to try to connect by developing middleware internally, and then by having extensive, zip code list that dictated like how much refrigerant you're adding to a zip code by state level. Like it's very
Mm.
complex stuff that happens in the backend. We essentially just simplify all that, created a beautiful software for it, and then integrated all the way through, the final destination and the shipping of it.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you recognize that you should take care of the back end too, the actual physical, movement of everything that your system is dictating. And I think recognizing too that the brands logistics is not necessarily their strong suit, and you should come in and be able to be that partner for them. I think makes total sense, and I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to do that and take a different approach to fulfillment on the cold chain side as well. And I've noticed, like, as I've talked to different operators or just people in the space, that I think refrigerated frozen space has been such a high demand for that type of space, just because there's been more of a push for things, whether it's grocery delivery or frozen meat, like you're talking about butcher box or something like that. There's been more demand for that, but I've noticed too that there's a lot of players in this space that have been around for a very long time, right? And that there's, whether they're some of the big names out there, or just like family owned, mom and pop kind of locations. But there seems that there's been kind of a challenge with them making a pivot to try and figure out e-commerce fulfillment for refrigerated or frozen goods. So I'm curious, like, why do you think that pivot has been so challenging, and why is that tough for some of the people that have been in the industry for a long time to kind of, I guess, adjust to this new way of doing fulfillment?
So it's a different business when you look at it like
Mhm.
from its core. I think a lot of them have beautiful businesses, and they've grown like very, very well, and they run amazing facilities. But at the end of the day, when you're taking a pallet in and you're doing, as an example, some cross docking, or you're storing for a month and then shipping somewhere else, or you're just like storing long term pallets as well, it's a completely different business than fulfilling e-commerce orders. And the reason for it is, it's because one is you're handling products by the eaches, which means that you're
Mhm.
handling like thousands of these eaches on a daily basis. And to be able to do that well, it's mostly just like a data and technology problem, and background that you need to be actually to like handle that in a way that you're adding value to your final customer. So one of them, which is the like the regular frozen storage, is more of a, I would even call it like a real estate. Like you're essentially just like selling real estate of your
Mm.
facility by a pallet location, which you can count at it like on a square footage, how many pallets you can fit on it, how many times you rotate it on a monthly basis, and then you're essentially just like taking a big piece of real estate and asset, you're chopping it into very small pieces, and then reselling that.
Mm.
On the other front, it's a completely different business. It's more of a services business that at the end of the day, you need to back it by the data and the decision making that goes before that to be able to offer that to your customers. Or if not, your customer has to do that on their end, so that you can then
Mm.
provide a good service for them as well. So someone has to do it. The problem with it is that all these new e-commerce brands, and brands that are doing millions of dollars in sale, is what I was saying before. Hey, they have great products, hey, they have amazing marketing and branding, but they're missing that link between, hey, how do I take that, and then how do I do a data backed approach to understand how do I need to ship my
Mm.
items across the country to every single zip code. That is more of a data logistics problem versus like an actual e-commerce problem or a warehousing problem. So
Mm.
that's where like there was almost like a missing link between like the different sections of the industry, where it makes it very, very challenging for someone that's doing pilot in, pilot out to move into this space if they don't have the appropriate software to do so, or the appropriate background to understand also what the pain point of the brand is as well. I think what has helped us a
Mm.
lot is that we come from the problem, and we like saw this problem firsthand, and we've tried to solve this problem for the last 10 years when we were getting started. Our CTO Jimmy Cooper used to be head of data at ButcherBox, so he comes from the problem as
Okay.
well. And
Yeah.
when we chat through something like that we're trying to solve or build internally, we always think in first person because
Mm,
we're essentially a customer internal. We're like, okay, what did we wish we had, or what do we think can add the most value to our brands when we're building stuff. So I think that link is just missing for a lot of people or some of the providers out there, and it just makes it challenging to move from one business to the other. And again, it's not like they don't have good businesses. It's beautiful businesses. They've been around for hundreds of years, like the concept of it. And
mm,
they're still growing and there's a lot of demand for it, but I think it's just two completely different business sets, which you then end up seeing with the experience that and the experience that they can provide to their customers as well.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense too. And you mentioned a lot in there around the kind of data backed decisions and, shipping, which way to ship to what zip codes, right? So, I mean, tell us, obviously when you talk about like dry goods, right? Ambient storage and things like that or fulfillment, there's definitely variations in the way you want to ship from like a cost savings perspective or a service level perspective. But tell us from, like a frozen temperature controlled perspective, why is that so important and so much more critical to get the shipping method and the way you're going to ship it from not only just a carrier but packaging perspective? I mean, why is it so much more important?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you a couple examples of it. So
Hmm.
let's say you're shipping a frozen product, you need to add dry ice to your box depending on where the box is going. So let's say that you add on a base level, you add 5 pounds of ice to a
Hmm.
box depending on how many days in transit that box is going to be out there for. So let's say that the carrier, call it FedEx or UPS for simplicity, they say that they get from zip code A, which is your origin point, to zip code B in 1 day. That's what the official zip table will say. But if our data says that, hey, every time you ship this box, either Monday or Tuesday, there is a 65% chance of the box to actually be delivered in 2 days versus one, meaning that's 1 day late, then why are you even planning for 1 day if the data says that that box is going to be on the road for 2 days? So if you have that information and you're essentially closing the loop from like the logistics performance and bringing that information back to the forefront of the equation in terms of how you ship your next box, then you're now are going to start to make those data back decisions so that you plan for what you see in the real world versus what's a theory or what the carriers are saying in terms of how fast they can deliver to the final customer. So adding that 5 extra pounds of ice for that extra day in transit that from a data back perspective that that box is going to be on the road for can mean the massive difference between, hey, I have my customer happy. I know that they're buying a premium product from me. So I know that I'm going to maintain and increase that lifetime value by providing them a good experience. And also, if I'm planning for 1 day, but the box is delivered in 2 days, it's going to be call it a bloody box of meat or some, damaged ready to eat meals
Hmm.
where you don't have to reship or refund that box, which is going to be hundreds of dollars in expense for you as a brand from reshipping or refunding the physical product, but then of course, more importantly, from the lifetime value of that product as well. So those are like the type of data back decisions that can it's make or break a specific situation with a customer where if you have the information, it's just a game changer for your company. And for us, which goes back to the prior point that we were making before, we make every single one of these decisions before the actual order or box hits the ground for fulfillment. Like we're not actually
Mm,
making these decisions on the ground. It's not necessarily like a physical like decision that someone is making while they're packing the box. Everything happens beforehand, which is why I was saying that, hey, this is more of a data technology problem, that as long as you have the right pieces of the equation in place, then you simplify it when that gets into the ground, and then everything flows much better and properly, and that way you can also gain efficiencies while you're fulfilling and packing that box.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the fact that you said it's everything is decided before it hits the floor, essentially, right? So, I mean, there's no real decision making, I guess, on the floor that needs to be made in terms of how that box is going to be packed and how much dry ice needs to go in there, and all those types of things, which I think is a great thing, because you avoid a lot of potential failures, or like wrong decisions maybe on the floor as well, which I think is a really interesting thing. And like you said, I mean, if you're shipping something and it needs to be frozen, delivered frozen, and it gets to the customer, and it's not, then that is a big issue, because sometimes we have some things we order and it's supposed to be 2-day shipping, and it arrives on the third day, and it's not frozen or anything like that. We're still going to keep the item as a customer, right? Like, we're not going to, maybe we'll ask for a credit or something if we paid extra for the shipping, but we don't have to send it back or anything like that. It's not usable at that point, right? But when you're talking about
Hmm.
like meat, for the example, right? If that meat is not frozen by the time it gets to you, and it's not really usable, right? I mean, you can't risk that. So I think it's very important to get those things right. And it's great that you're using that data to support that and be able to make those better decisions. And then I'm sure for the brands that you're partnered with, that are your clients, are certainly seeing the benefits of having that, and getting the right decisions made, before that even order even hits the floor to do that. So I mean, if you are a brand that's looking to, whether you're shipping perishable goods now, or you're looking to start a brand that's starting, wants to ship perishable goods, I mean, what are some of the things that they should take into consideration as they're developing their brand and growing their business, when it comes to fulfilling these, and especially from like an operational perspective, getting themselves set up to be able to have success with perishable goods?
I mean, it first depends what type of product you're shipping. Different
Mm,
products behave very, very differently in the mail, and they require different amounts of insulation and refrigerant, and types of refrigerant as well, because you could ship with, for example, gel packs or dry ice, or a combination of it if you want to get very sophisticated with it, and more complex. But it really just first depends on identifying what type of product you're shipping, to see what solutions you need to have in place. And then where are your final customers located? Like, where within the country do you have the highest density? Or what type of strategy do you want to do to start with? There's a few things that you can do. The first one is, hey, you don't necessarily have the volume to start with multiple fulfillment centers day one. So hey, let's choose one fulfillment center. That way you can focus on providing a very good and economically feasible experience to people that are close to the fulfillment center. And all the other people, let's call it, if you're in the East Coast first and then you want to go to the West Coast, then you're going to end up doing 2-day express for those customers, which means that either they
mm,
have to pay for it, or you take a hit to your bottom line while you get started. But then you build up the volume, and then you end up having another West Coast facility. At that point, you're already getting to, let's call it, 70% of the country in 2 days or less. And then you have the other 30% that you're still 2-day expressing, which means that you then open another facility, let's call it, centralized location of the country, Oklahoma or Dallas, where you can then get to essentially 100% of the population in 2 days or less. But those are like decisions that a good partner can help you make by saying, hey, let's start with this facility. We can get to X% of the population in 2 days or less. This is going to be your shipping cost by doing this. If you express, in like 2-day air to this other percentage of the population, and this is how much the all-in cost is going to be for you, so that you can build your, financial and economic models internally to understand, what are different levers that you can pull in terms of refrigerant versus air shipping versus ground versus amount of insulation, and essentially like
mm.
getting used to all that decision making at first, so that you can then expand into facilities and pull the different triggers where you can. So that's all super important. As I was saying, like 5-10 years ago, it was very hard to put this together, because you had to go to essentially multiple parties involved and build your own models internally. But with some of the technology out there and some of the new models out there, you can now essentially partner up and like work with someone where this is their sole own responsibility, and this is the only focus that they have is, hey, empowering all these brands and building all this great technology, and interconnect the network, so that they can focus on what they do best.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting too, that you mentioned about kind of the locations, and what to look for from like a network perspective. because it does become
Hmm.
super important, especially when you need to meet certain shipping windows, and the further away you are from the customer, and then it's going to increase your cost on that level and all those things too. So very interesting stuff with you here, Juan. And I'm curious, as you look to kind of the future of grip and just the future of like cold chain fulfillment as well. I mean, where do you see kind of the space evolving, and do you see more technology coming into play? I mean, what does the future look like for you?
When I look into the future, I see faster decision making,
Mm,
because the more data that you add into these models, and the more AI that you have available, just the better algorithms that you have to make all these decisions, then the faster and more accurate decisions you can make. Because at the end of the day, like, it's not really like, hey, will these delays happen, or will these damages happen, or will these major weather events happen? That the question is not like if, the question is like, when will it happen? And then
mm,
after it happens, how do I react as a shipper, as a company, to make sure that I'm pulling the right levers and I'm playing with the right variables to make sure that I'm still providing an A plus experience to my final customer that just bought a box for me. So because it's a question of when will it happen, then it just means that to be able to react very fast to this and even be proactive and predict a lot of these issues, which can be seen through the data. And that all just requires much more faster decision making from a software standpoint, so that you can
mm,
then on the ground essentially just follow like the what has been dictated by the data and the software, which is very hard, of course, if you're not doing both things. Because you can't really, like, you need to understand also what happens on the ground, because it's a
yeah.
major key component of the operation, and you can't necessarily just make like data decisions in a black box without understanding what it takes to accommodate then that on the ground. So that's why it's very important. It's a massive value add to be that data, be that decision making, be that technology partner, but also then have the operation. Because that, when you connect those two, is where like 1 plus 1 is not necessarily two, because you're just like, you connect those two things, and it just like takes the whole operations and logistics game to the next level on the ground. So for the future, I see faster decision making, just like taking variables into account that you can't necessarily do so by just having Excel spreadsheets or trying to do formulas yourself. But things like, hey, the Super Bowl is this weekend on this area of town, and whenever that happens, that
Mm,
means that carriers, when it's usually a 95% on time delivery to the zip code, is going to drop
yeah.
to 35% on time delivery. Okay, you have
Mm,
65% of the customers that are shipping to that zip code that are going to get a delayed box that is going to be damaged. So hey, do I hold
yeah.
this box, or do I add extra refrigerant? Okay, if you add
Mm,
extra refrigerant, then the Super Bowl is on the weekend, so the box is still going to be late, Monday, Tuesday, so it's not necessarily going to be worth it. So, hey, let's hold this box and let the customer know instead. So that's like essentially
mm.
multiple layers of decisions that you just had to make, because there was like one event that you saw coming to that one zip code that you can essentially predict the delay and provide a better experience to the customer. But that's all, as I was saying, you can do it through the data and with technology.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that the decision making processes are certainly speeding up more, and I think it'd be interesting to see like how they get even faster, and like you said, like little kind of intricate things like that from like a manual perspective, if you're trying to just zone out like one area, one pocket of where customers are, and figure out that they're, oh, because this event is going on, there's going to be delays for these customers specifically, we need to adjust that. Like, that's very hard to kind of figure out just through, like you said, spreadsheets and just manual kind of thinking and decision making. But having that data, and then layering on some AI on top of that in the future too, I mean, I think is going to make it so much easier to have that better customer experience, but then also save a ton of money for the business too, without having those damaged shipments or products out there as well. So very interesting talking to you here, Juan, about this, and interesting what you developed at Grip based on your background and the experiences you've had previously, and very excited to see how you continue to grow it and evolve the business as well. If people are interested in getting in touch or learning more about Grip, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to gripshipping.com, leave us a note there, or they can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. Juan Camilo Meisel is how I'm out there, and I'd be happy to hear about the type of problems that they're facing and how can we partner up to help them get the company to the next level. We've seen incredible results and super fast growth within the industry. And I think that that's just because of some of the reasons that I was saying before, that when you connect the technology with the operation on the ground, that's where you really just see, like an exponential improvement to what our partners and customers are doing before.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well so people can easily find it and get in touch with Juan. So, Juan, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And it's great what you're doing for the industry and just putting all these information and knowledge up there. I listen to the podcast a lot, and there's always new topics
Thank you.
and just new data and technology out there. So yeah, thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Definitely. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.